Hey everybody, it's Greg Sharp and welcome to Inside Armwrestling, the home for everything in arm wrestling, fitness, strength, and strength fitness events. I probably jumbled that a little bit, but that's all right. You know, I'll eventually get used to this. It's probably only our 21st episode and I still don't have the intro down. And really, I don't even have the outro down. But today is a great day. I wore my white professional shirt today. I've got my glasses on. That can only mean one thing, folks. We are going to talk about a topic that is a little bit more, maybe a little bit more elevated in terms of information than just who's who on the arm wrestling table and what events are coming next. And today I wanted to talk to you all about something that's really becoming a value in the world of arm wrestling, certainly a value in the terms in the world of business. But I want to talk to you about contracts. And the reason I want to talk to you about contracts is because there are a lot of posts going out there these days. There's a lot of conjecture on certain athletes perhaps becoming banned, certain athletes perhaps being under contract, and what a real contract does to an athlete, and really to see if there's some validity to the contract. I mean, you hear all these terms, and as a promoter, there's always a value that if your promotion is strong enough, that you should be able to get the loyalty and the value from the athlete to come to you, regardless of whether or not you put a contract in front of somebody, unless, of course, you're giving them some sort of value that goes beyond really what the status quo is of the industry. And therefore, perhaps, there is a contractual obligation. One of the greatest contractual obligations in the world of entertainment and sports, and when we call it sports entertainment, was the WWF, eventually the WWE. And there are a lot of athletes that have gone through the roles and the annals of the WWE at this point, and many of them have been under contract. And the reason why is because they want to protect their asset, number one, but they also want to protect their investment. And many times when it comes to sports entertainment, they're protecting an image in which they're building for that athlete that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So there is a lot of value in contracts. There's a lot of drawbacks in contracts as well. So I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about contracts and really the components of contracts and what that should really mean to an athlete when they're looking at what a contract can do, as well as what it really means to a promoter when they're offering a contract as to whether or not their contract really can stand that litmus test of validity. So I've kind of brought down 5 different components of a contract. I kind of want to go over them with you, give you a little bit of insight as to what is legal, what is not legal. Now, I am not a lawyer, so I can't tell you with a 100% certainty what's legal, what's not. But I can tell you that I've been dealing with contracts for 30 years, whether I've been a general contractor, whether I've been an expert witness, whether I've been a forensic investigator, all on different levels of contractual obligations. I can tell you that there are some basic values that I see that ultimately backfire for athletes as well as for the contracting entity that's trying to really corral that athlete into some sort of legal premise in which they can hold on to their image or their entity. So I'm going to take my glasses off. By the way, Rumble Roller, that's right. Steel Series bands, that's right. And smelling salts, and that fit. Always giving a shout out to our sponsors. It's important for us. I want to make sure that everybody knows who we're dealing with these days and what actually they bring to the table. So I'm going to list it out, and as we go through this, you'll have to kind of follow along. And the best way to do this also, guys, is to really, is get on the web. I mean, the web gives you a ton of information. So if you ever have questions as to whether or not a contract is legal, the first thing you should do is ultimately talk to your lawyer, right? A lawyer has gone to school. They're not working a 9 to 5 at the local flea market and hiding their real profession of practicing law on the side. A lawyer's gone through years of law school. They've taken the bar. They're practicing in a state. They know what the terms of the contracts are, or terms of contracts that are valid and not. So if you ever have a question on your contract, it's great that you're watching Inside Arm Wrestling, but the reality is, folks, you should be talking to your lawyer. Now, on my perspective is what really is I want to draw out to you are a couple of items that I think are valued when you're going over a contract to really determine whether or not it's right for you. Number one thing, you should never sign a contract if you're being coerced or if you're in a state of duress. Those two things are never great ways for you to engage in a relationship, simply because it automatically negates the validity of a contract if someone can prove that they were coerced or they were put into a series of duress or situation of duress in which they had no other choice but to enter that contract. So if you're ever in those two states, realize that that contract that you're signing has really some challengeable features, in my opinion, and from what I've seen. So, and if you're in a matter of duress or you're being coerced, then you really should probably start to find legal counsel and legal help, or maybe even authorities. I mean, at some point, there are collusions and racketeering laws that you could potentially be a part of and not even know that you're being a victim of that. So always do your homework, folks. And if you are being coerced or you are under duress, take a step back, because ultimately a good contract is going to, stand the test of time, and it'll be there when you really need it to be there. Now, for me, a contract is an old adage, and the old adage is a lock makes an honest person honest. And a contract basically locks in one side and another side in terms of some terms in which are mutually agreeable and enforceable, and there's value, right? So when you look at a contract, you really have 5 different levels of breakdown that you should look at. And number one is mutual assent. And what mutual assent is that is mutually both sides of the contract in agreement that there's a mutual value, meaning that am I buying a house for $1 and I'm coercing that person to take my offer of $1 because I put them under a value of duress or coercion, and then is that a value that what I'll call a reasonable person would accept for their house? If I have $1 million house and all of a sudden I do a deal for $1, does a reasonable person actually buy or sell a house for $1? And honestly, the answer is no. So on these 5 different topics that we're going to talk about, we're going to kind of look at the good and what they mean and what they don't. So under mutual assent, both sides have to have what they call a reasonable offer and in reasonable terms. So if you go into a contract and you're arm wrestling and the terms are, you're going to arm wrestle for us and you're going to pay your own airfare, you're going to pay your own hotel, if you're going to pay your own food, you're going to pay your own entry fee, you're going to pay the promoter to have you on there. Is it really a mutual value that a reasonable person would ultimately say that there's a reason to have that contract? The answer may be no. Now, maybe that organization is making you do that because the level of exposure that you're going to get far outweighs what you could do on your own or anybody else in that matter could do on their own. And therefore, maybe there is a mutual reasonable reason to have a contract that would be so one-sided on a financial end for you as an athlete that would make sense for you to take it. Now, I could say this in my opinion. I don't know that there is an organization out there currently that would offer that kind of mutual assent, if you will, that I would as an athlete or any athlete should pay into the system in order for someone else to benefit from me on a financial end. I think that there is a mutual fiduciary responsibility to this. However, mutual assent is the number one litmus test that you should really go through when you're looking at a contract and can be challenged in a contract. Number 2, is the offer valid and acceptable? Okay. Again, mutual assent goes back to that reasonable sides, and valid offer and acceptable is now when we start to get into some legality. You can buy a car, okay, and you can buy a car for $20. It may be worth $20,000, but is that offer a valid offer based upon the value in which you're getting, and is it really acceptable? Now, why does that kind of come into play, and why do I use the car? Well, a lot of people always buy cars back in the day. They would put $100 on the title and they would exchange the car, but there would be an envelope of, $5,000 cash that goes under the table to the actual owner of the car. But the buyer of that car would get the value or the benefit of the lower taxation on $100. What had happened? Well, we had the Kelley Blue Books come out, and now there's assessed values that are based upon that vehicle in which the state can tax you. And so what they did is they became more of an accountant, if you will, to make sure that the validity of the offer is not only acceptable to both parties, but also acceptable to the governing state. So the validity of an offer and the acceptability of an offer is kind of the number 2 litmus test. Are all parties are being reasonably handled, and is there a governing party that also is being reasonably remunerated, if you will, for the efforts of both parties? And there can be a lot of governance on that. So when you're entering a contract, are you getting a valid offer? If you're getting a chance to go arm wrestle with XYZ promotion, are they giving you something that's very, very reasonable and attainable to you? And if so, is that offer acceptable in terms of where you live? I mean, are you getting paid? Do you have to pay taxes? Has a provision of taxation in it? And again, those are all kind of terms, if you will, to create what we'll call a valid offer and an acceptable offer on all levels. The next thing is kind of an interesting one. It's called adequate consideration. And really adequate consideration is in terms of a timeline. Are both sides adequately considered to be mutually beneficial to this? Has there been an adequate amount of consideration for both parties to be able to accept it? And again, maybe that comes down to duress or coercion. When you look at a contract, there's a timeline. If I hand a contract over to my buyer or to a builder, to a client, as I'm a builder in my contractual life, do I give them enough time, or am I pushing it down on their throat in order for them to take advantage of it? Well, here in the state of California, you actually have a 3-day right of recession. So the state gives you an adequate amount of time for you to have remorse in signing that contract when we come to building. Now, in the same value, is the contract that you're looking at, have you had an adequate amount of time to make a fruitful consideration for that contract? And that, again, lies in the validity of the contract. So when somebody gives you a contract that says sign this, and if you don't sign this, you're not going to get the opportunity to compete, whether it's in arm wrestling or whether it's in, Tiddlywinks. Tiddlywinks is an old game, folks. I'm dating myself here. But whatever that case may be, did you get enough time to actually adequately consider what it is that you're getting involved in? So now you got coming into the real last 2 of the 5 that I go over. There is a term called capacity in the eyes of the law. And what that capacity really means is, can both sides deliver on what those agreed promises are? And here is where a lot of contracts get into what I would call trouble or challengeability. I could be a promoter, and my promotion may tell you, if you come with us, we're going to make you an internet star, social media star. We're going to deliver to you 100,000 followers. We're going to deliver to you a financial bearing YouTube channel, TikTok channel. We're going to give you all of these financial values that coming aboard with us would successfully be able to be delivered to you as a contracted athlete. And that's where capacity really becomes a little bit of a gray area. And then on the flip side, the athlete also has capacity. If you're 450 pounds and you have an event that's 6 weeks away and you are signing an agreement to arm wrestle at 239, do you really have the ability to deliver? And was both sides, again, given adequate consideration in order for a good decision to be made? And what I mean by that is, perhaps the other side doesn't realize that you're 450 pounds and you're signing in on a contract that says, I'll arm wrestle at 239. Was there an adequate amount of consideration in terms of time for the other organization, in this case, the contractual organization, to be able to check out what your body weight is? Did you give them a reasonable picture and a reasonable value of what you look like? And is it reasonable for you to think that you can lose 200 pounds in 6 weeks? So capacity is really a term that really, I think, kind of sways contracts. Can one side deliver? Can the other side deliver? Can both sides deliver on the promise of coming together at a specific time and in a specific way? As well as it also defines longevity. Capacity is a value of time. So if I'm signing in a contract to build a house again, can I deliver that house on a timeline based upon a value in which I put in the contract? If I'm signing an arm wrestling contract, can the promotion that I'm signing with deliver the amount of exposure that they're basically committing to? Point on term. There were organizations out there that were signing athletes at one point in arm wrestling, but they were signing them with the understanding that they were going to be competing multiple times a year. Ultimately, they may have only competed one time. Some of people that I've again heard through conversation didn't really get to compete at all for many reasons. Travel didn't work out, timelines didn't work out, physicality didn't work out. So now, on that capacity end, does that contract give that athlete the ability to deliver? And therefore, you really have to look at that. So when you're looking at a contract, look at how that contract is structured to see if that contracting entity can really deliver for you as an athlete, and vice versa. Can that athlete really deliver for you as an organization? So number 4 point capacity is very important, guys. Matter of fact, it may be the most important thing when it comes to a contract or being a contracted athlete. Because when you start looking at capacity, you're really starting to get into the nuts and bolts of longevity, timelines, and whether or not there really is a capacity for both sides to maintain an equitable agreement, a mutual ascension agreement, and make sure that the offer is valid and acceptable. The last thing that I want to kind of touch upon is legality. Now, legality is really, for the lack of a better word, an ambiguous term, in my opinion, because the legality of something is defined based upon the rule of law in any given area in which the contract is assumably presented. So, if I am building in the state of California and I give a contract out to my neighbor to build a home addition to them, in my contract, I have to state where the region of legality is based upon this contract. So in this case, it would be the state of California. The state of California would be the legal basis of which I'm drawing this contract up, in which I'm counting on it being enforceable in. Now, if I breach my contract or my client breaches their contract, I can't go to Illinois to try to enforce California law. Number one, Illinois is not the same on a legal basis as California. Number two, any judge would tell you right off the bat before you even filed that you need to go into your own jurisdiction. And therefore, jurisdiction and legality plays a big part of contracts. In order to be enforceable, you have to have a body in which can enforce it. If I have a contract that's, again, on the flip side, for an athlete that's coming from Florida, but I choose to try to put in the enforcement that I want a neutral site of New York to be where I would enforce the laws, well then I need to make sure that my contract abides by the laws of New York and not of California or not of Florida. So the legal body in which this enforcement has to take place has to have a rule of law that's consistent with what your agreement is. So when you start talking about the legality of the agreement, is this an international agreement? Where are the terms of that agreement being enforced? Is this a domestic agreement? Is the terms of it being enforced in the contractors' jurisdiction of where they're doing business, which is really 99% of where that is done. Very, very few times are you ever pushed out of a jurisdiction when it comes to contractual obligation, unless there's some really mitigating factors. And in turn, are you really identifying yourself with that contract to know as an athlete or a contracting personality whether or not you can really abide by those laws? In the world of entertainment, Delaware is a great place to set up an LLC. When you go over the terms of an agreement, if it's an investment agreement, you're bound by the terms of Delaware, okay? Rhode Island is another one. Louisiana is another one. And a lot of contractual entities go to these because the contractual law is very ambiguous. It's very vague in many cases, and it can be very beneficial to the contractor, and it can release liability to the contractor. So where your home is, or where that jurisdiction in which this enforcement comes into play a big time. If you're contracting from somebody that's in California and it's a state of California legal agreement, and you live in Florida or New York, you have to understand that you are subjected to come to California to fight that contract. They don't have to come to Florida. They don't have to come to New York. Where that body of interest is developed that contract and the jurisdiction it's under, that's where the settling of that case and the litigation of that case is going to happen. So when you look at contracts, and it's very important, in my opinion, again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV, although I might write a script here one of these days where I am a lawyer, which might be pretty cool. I mean, Greg Sharp Esquire, maybe that. It could be a show. We'll put it on hold, guys. I'm not pitching that yet. Netflix, if you see it, certainly you can run with it. I'm ready for you. But again, when it comes to contract, really understand those 5 major components of the contract that you might be signing. Understand how it affects you. Do you have a mutual ascension or mutual ascension? Is the offer valid and acceptable? Do reasonable people figure that this is a reasonable value? Has there been a timeline of adequate consideration? Does the contractor or the contract lead to a capacity that's attainable? And where is that jurisdiction in which this contract is being tendered in order to make sure that it's something that's fair to you as an athlete, as well as something that's 100% enforceable, which it may not be. In all of that, my suggestion to you guys is always to make sure that you don't ever sign an agreement because you're becoming coerced to do it. You should never have somebody else tell you that you need to do this. You better do this. If you don't do this, and put you under a state of duress in which you're making a very bad choice, always sit back down. Let the world spin around once, twice. I can always tell you if it's a valid offer, it'll be there when you get back around on that world. Very, very few offers come off the table within seconds. Take your time. Get legal counsel. Understand the jurisdiction that you're in. And always remember that any contract that you would sign should have an overwhelming value of difference to your life, because ultimately you are going to subject yourself to terms that may encompass 30 days, 60 days, 6 months, a year, or more. Is your life quality or life value and those best interests taken care of in that contract, or is that contract so heavy upon you that it takes away the quality of which you exist? And for arm wrestlers, let's face it, it's not a sport of incredible money. So when you're starting to put yourself in a situation where your images and likeness and your abilities to compete on a wide range of platforms is negated, you have to really understand whether or not that's going to affect the quality of your life, the quality of your friendships, the quality of your team relationships, and really the quality in which the sport is built on. So always make great decisions, folks. I think it's really important, and I think it's a topic that it doesn't get talked about enough in the mainstream, so I wanted to kind of attack it today. So I got to do my outro. If you like these stories and want to see more, please hit the subscribe button, the like button, and the notification button. That kind of comes anyway. We have a little adage that we add to the end, which is always pretty cool. Always, make sure that you're following us on social media, World Series of Arm Wrestling, all those great things. And this has been Greg Sharp. Remember to train hard, pull smart, and to lift safe. Thank you. Folks, if you like these stories and you want to see more, please hit the like button and subscribe to our page. Also hit the notification bell underneath the video so that way you're notified every time a new video comes out. And if you're on social media, specifically Instagram, go to the World Series of Arm Wrestling Instagram page. Please follow it. We'll try to follow you back, but it'll keep you up to date with all of the news and events in the world of arm wrestling.